please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
About 38 years ago in 1981, Narayana Murthy, along with his 6 engineer friends from Pune, came together to form a tech company and called it Infosys, with an initial capital of just $250. In June 1993, which is exactly 25 years ago, the founders decided to list their company on Dalal Street. The response to the Infosys IPO was tepid, so much so that Morgan Stanley had to bail it out by buying 13% of the total offer for sale. But look how the fortunes changed for the company. The stock has been a top wealth creator for investors, giving returns of a whopping 6,800 times. From 145 rupees per share 25 years ago to 1,240 rupees per share now, it has been a phenomenal journey for Infosys. The outperformance goes beyond Dalal Street. Infosys is the first pure IT services company to be listed on the Indian bourses. It is the first Indian company to be listed on the Nasdaq, the first company to share wealth with employees, and also the first company to start giving quarterly guidance. In June 2006, the founders made their first public appearance together on the CNBC TV18's platform since the company listed. Here's Narayana Murthy and his team talking about the journey to build a company, an institution called Infosys.
Celebrating 15 years of Young Turks.
Thank you very, very much for braving the rain and joining us here.
So what do you think, which are the companies that you think will go global?
ATM for sure.
Every 6 years I have added a zero. Today I am only 57. Warren Buffett is 87. Imagine how many zeros are needed.
Today we felicitate the top 10 who made it to the Young Businesswomen 2016.
When I started your story, I always had this dream. Young Turks should cover me, right? I cover all stories. Young Turks should cover me.
Starting at 17 in an industry where everyone else was in their 50s was a little tough.
Can't believe 13 years. Makes me feel old. You don't grow old. What happens?
Last year when Utta Punjab released, so we got the tickets. I was late. We were not able to go for the movie and Vanna was really angry. And I told her if Mr. Murthy would have watched movies in the evening, Infosys would not have been built.
It's now time for the most awaited session of the evening, the story of the original tech startup Infosys. Mr. Narayana Murthy launched the Young Turks book 2 years ago, and in his keynote then said that for him starting Infosys at 35 was a do-or-die situation. While today the premium is on starting early, take a look at how 6 professionals proved it's never too late to start out.
There are thousands and probably millions of entrepreneurs in the country who would say, look, if these 7 jokers could do it together, we could do it too. I think that is the ultimate compliment that can be paid to Infosys.
The morning of January 1981, they gave birth to an idea that was far ahead of its time. Narayana Murthy and 6 software engineers sat in his apartment debating on how they could create a company to write software codes.
Speaking of that 10 by 10 room, did you think that, you would strike this kind of a chemistry?
We were all working under Murthy's leadership. He's able to lead by example. He's a very fair person, even though he's very tough. In fact, he's toughest mostly on me, so.
6 months later, Infosys was registered as a private limited company in Pune.
There were many other groups like us which started. Not one is really there.
For over 3 decades, Infosys has been a company that's focused on bringing to life great ideas and enterprise solutions that drive progress for their clients. Today, it is a global leader in consulting, technology, outsourcing, and next-generation services.
They say that you should team up with people whom you can grow old together with. And that's really been our story. We are all with people whom we're happy growing older with.
As I've often said, if I have to do it again, we'll do it with the same people.
CNBC TV18 welcomes the founders of the original tech startup, Infosys, to the Young Turks Summit, the original tech startup story.
Wow. Standing ovation, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor and a privilege it is for me to introduce you here to this esteemed team that has, in that sense, democratized entrepreneurship in India. I've had the privilege and the pleasure of interviewing each and every one of them individually over the past 16 years that I've been at CNBC TV18, and I have to say that Mr. Murthy has been a personal mentor. I've enjoyed my conversations immensely with Nandan. When Nandan did his book, we did a special series on CNBC TV18 with Chris Gopalakrishnan in his latest venture with Itihas. CNBC TV18 has been proud to sort of take that story forward with Shibu and the entrepreneurial venture, including his own daughter's entrepreneurial venture, which was featured on Young Turks several years ago with Mr. Raghavan and Mr. Dinesh Shah. Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to have you all here with us today. So, Mr. Murthy, let me start by asking you, and I'm going to get all of you to go back in time a little bit and then talk about the future as well. But let me ask you to go back in time, Mr. Murthy. There was a very telling comment there in that audiovisual that we played out. And you said there that if you had to do it all over again, you would do it with exactly the same cast of characters. And Nandan said pretty much the same thing. He said the beauty of Infosys has been the fact that it's been built by a team that was okay with growing old together. How did you manage this chemistry? Because this is something that a lot of young entrepreneurs here would like to understand. A lot of startups fail, not because the business is bad or the product is bad, but because the entrepreneurs fall out. The founders don't see eye to eye. They don't agree with each other. And I know that Infosys has been one of the biggest debating societies, so it's not as if all of you agreed on everything. But what was the secret sauce that kept you all together?
You know, we were all working together in Mumbai at Patni Computer Systems Limited. I was very fortunate to put together a very high quality team. There are probably about 100 very smart youngsters. And by then I had understood that there are three basic ingredients for running the entrepreneurial marathon. One, you need competence. Second, you need commitment. And third, you need character, a value system. And while I was working with all these people, I was able to realize that all these people had the three ingredients that we were looking for, that I was looking for. And that's how we all came together.
Okay, Nandan, let me take that forward. Again, in that audio-visual, in that interview that we did, I think that interview was done in 2002 or 2003, if I remember correctly. And you said that a lot of companies started up around the same time that Infosys did, but not all of them have either had the kind of success that you've had, not all of them exist today. What was it about the Infosys story that not just democratized entrepreneurship, but has been able to be sustainable, profitable, and see over 3 decades of growth?
I think, as Murthy said, we were all had a common vision, common set of values. We all had middle-class values. We had the same sense of deferred gratification, that we were willing to postpone benefits for a decade before we actually saw the benefits. And I think we also brought complementary skills. Everybody had different skills, and the skills, when they came together, was a great combination. Everybody was very good at work. I was good at the BS part of it. So that was my contribution. So I think the fact that we had this extraordinary team together, and I think because of the leadership of Murthy and the inspiration that he gave us, we always put the company before any of us. So the company was larger than any of us. So when there was a disagreement, finally we took the decision that was best for the company, even though it meant some personal sacrifice. So I think the ability to put...
So he had the final vote?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He still has. We had a meeting this afternoon and he was reading me the riot act. So we can vote for that. Okay? So, so anyway, I think, that's one thing. But also I think the idea of Infosys, the vision, the dream was more important than our individual egos. And I find in most companies and startups, I see a lot of them. I think unless you're willing to subordinate your ego to a larger cause, you will not have sustainability. And I think that was the big thing.
But Chris Gopalakrishnan, I just, everyone chuckled here when I said, does he have the final say or does he have the final vote? But how important is that? Because otherwise you can, for eternity try and build consensus. But really, how important is it that one individual or one founder in that sense then has the casting vote?
So clearly, you have to have a decision-making process. So you need to say, okay, let everybody voice their opinion. And ultimately, when the time comes to make the decision, one person has to make the decision if we can't get consensus. If we can get consensus, well and good, then we go forward. I think the respect for each other and the ability to look at every single transaction from a new beginning, I think is very important. You may have lost in one transaction, but then in the next transaction you will win because you start from zero again. And that's how we go forward.
Okay. Dinesh, you were smiling when you said, did you vouch for the fact that Mr. Murthy always had the final say? But if I could ask you, and I remember this comment that Mr. Murthy made to me many years ago in an interview, that Infosys was the biggest debating society where everyone had their say, but finally what was good for the company, that was the decision that prevailed. What were some of the biggest disagreements that you've had if you can go back in time?
No, I'll tell you, our own existence, I don't know whether we would have seen all of you if we had taken a decision in 1989 when Murthy called us for a meeting in Jayanagar office. I hope you remember. Nandan, myself and Raghavan were there. Chris and Shibu were there in US. So things were not going on well, in the business. So we are not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And there was a proposal Murthy brought in and said, it is available for sale now. So can we sell it off, for $1 million or $2 million? This is 89. We were still a private limited company.
9 years into your existence, about 9 years into your existence.
So, and at that time, because we had a joint venture, it had gone wrong. And earlier to that, we were doing some business with one client. That also did not take off. So now we were at the end of the tunnel. So what do we do? Murthy is asking. So one by one, he started asking us, we debated. Finally, we had to take a decision. So Nandan said, yeah, if that is the only choice we have, we'll close down. Then I also said, we will do that. Raghavan also said, yeah, we'll have to do if that is the only choice. But finally what Murthy said was, no, if you guys are ready to sell off, but I'm ready to buy you guys out. But he knew he had no money to buy. He admitted that later on. Then we all said, if you are the one who called this meeting, if you are ready to sync together, we are ready to sync with you. If you are ready to ship together, we are ready to ship with you. That is how we are seeing it today. So sometimes leaving the decision. When we are all same-minded people, but we are all similar-minded people, not same-minded people. If we were all similar-minded people, same-minded people, I don't think I would have seen you all today. Because we differed with each other. So if there are two people who agree all the time, one of them is not required. And having said that, if there are two people who disagree all the time, both of them are not required.
But Mr. Murthy, there's an important lesson in that anecdote.
I used to start out with the world map. I used to tell them that this is the world. Map. This is India. This is Bangalore. I come from there and I speak English. That's the opening remark we used to give when we started our.
I speak English.
Celebrating 15 years of Young Turks.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs here today. The talk, unfortunately, comes down to valuation. The talk comes down to, what is the best price that you can extract for yourself? When should you exit? That's the conversation that we seem to be having around the startup ecosystem at this point in time. What gave you the confidence to hold out in 1989? When you were getting $1 million, things were not looking that great. You were about 8 or 9 years into your existence.
The reason why I was somewhat desirous on continuing was simply the fact that we had run this marathon for 10 years, 1990 or so. And we had gotten used to austerity. We had gotten used to, being away from home. We had gotten used to troubling, our wives and children with asking them to live very frugally. And I said, look, who knows what the future will hold good? Why not take a little bit more of risk and run this marathon? And as luck would have it, 1991 economic reforms happened, and then, of course, there was no turning back. So it was just a question of saying that, look, we have enjoyed each other's company, we have learned from each other, we have learned to accept deferred gratification, we have learned to live in an austere manner, and we are enjoying all of this. So I said, why bring this show to an end? That was the idea.
Okay. Shibu, let me ask you, and I'm again going to jog your memory a little bit. I think it was 1995, the summer of 1995, and this was a tough negotiation that you were having with a client at the Taj Residency Hotel in Bangalore. I think at that point in time, this client contributed almost 25% of your revenues, and you had a tough call to make on that negotiating table. Take us through that, because I think there are lessons to be learned here for this room full of entrepreneurs, and maybe Mr. Murthy can chip in as well. But
on that one, I'm going to ask Mr. Murthy to answer.
Do you have another anecdote? Then you want to you want to throw away
something else? Mr. Murthy.
Again, we were all together. Shivu was in the U.S. Myself, Nandan, Dinesh, Raghavan, Mohan. Mohan is missing. Then Fanish and Chris. We were all there. And at the end of the 2-day negotiations, we had to give an answer whether we'll continue with the reduced rates or not. Somehow my logic was not that it will not be fair to us, it will not be fair to the customer, because we would not be able to provide them all the benefits in terms of investments in technology, investments in training, etc. So therefore, they were all looking to me to give an answer, and I said, look, we will very respectfully, very courteously hand over all this business to whosoever you choose, even though it's going to be quite a strain for us in terms of financial, in terms of revenues. And that was a decision that I took, simply because I felt that if I had accepted that, then we had to accept lower prices from every other customers, and therefore our growth would slow down, and more importantly, our profitability would slow down. That was...
So Shibu, let me then ask you, now that he's given us this anecdote, but let me ask you about how hard it was, at least in the initial years, to sell the India story, to sell the fact that here was a company and I know Mr. Murthy believed in creating this sort of island of prosperity in the backyard of Bangalore city, but how hard was it for you to sell the India story, especially in the US?
So actually that was very hard. In fact, I think the first client Infosys had outside was DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. I remember going to the first sales meeting. I was pretty naive at that point in time. I went and I started telling them that, we are from Bangalore, we are from India, and soon I realized that they don't understand where India is. Next time onwards, I used to start out with the world map. I used to tell them that this is the world map, this is India, this is Bangalore, I come from there and I speak English. That was the opening remark which we used to give when we started our...
I speak English.
I speak English, because it was new to them. They were not used to having people from India coming and saying that we will build these systems. So it was a pretty hard thing to do. And everybody whom you used to meet at that time would ask about cows on the road and, things like that. And world changed over a period of time, and today everybody who meets on the road will ask you, are you a software engineer? So things changed. But it was a very, very difficult and long journey. It required a lot of persistence. See, I wanted to add to some of this conversation. Number one, I think Infosys always believed that ideas are diameters and execution is the key. So this is a clear example of execution, right? Whether it is in the 80s or in 90s or in 2000 onwards, it is a clear example of execution. The ability to execute. Always Mr. Murthy used to say strategy is 5% of the time, 95% of the time is execution. And it's a good example of the result of that focus in execution. That is number one. Number two, as Mr. Murthy always used to believe in quality. I remember in 1983, one day night, we woke up one of our clients. 84. We were installing a computer in Myco right here in Bangalore. And in the middle of the night, so we had worked 10 days without sleep, both of us. And in the middle of the night, on the last day of our testing, in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock, Mr. Murthy found something. Of course, he yelled at me, but then said, we will call the client. 1 o'clock at night, we called the client. He was absolutely unhappy, but he came down. And he looked at the error which Mr. Murthy found and said that this is not an error. It was not an error. It was actually a bug in the operating system.
Okay.
So he laughed at us and went back. But next day morning, he came into the department and told me, I still remember, they were all ready to do the testing, acceptance testing. He told his staff, these guys are so good at it, so transparent, so honest, so committed to the quality of this, that we will suspend the testing and accept the system as of right now. So they accepted the system next day morning based on our testing. So the focus on quality, the focus on execution, these are all hallmarks of Infosys success.
Mr. Raghavan, one of the other hallmarks of Infosys has also been not just democratizing entrepreneurship, but also democratizing wealth creation. And I think one of the big things that Infosys did when you launched your Esop scheme in 1994 and then followed that up was this business of democratizing wealth creation. Take us through what went on in the boardroom at that point in time. What made you want to do this? If I remember correctly, one of your annual reports said that ESOPs gives us a unique positioning, democratizing wealth, and suddenly professionals realized that they could also become wealthy by ethical means in their careers. What was it that drove you to do this?
Before I answer the question, can I give an anecdote?
Please. So I'm looking for juicy anecdotes that I don't already have.
Where, for a change, I was in the driver's seat and Murthy was in the back seat.
How often did that happen?
Not often, very rarely. So this was the year 1983. So at the time I was working for Databases Corporation in New York. I got a call from Murthy that we have landed a contract with Myco, now Robert Bosch. So you better come back immediately. We have to set up the office and start the training program, etc. So I came down. We took a small house as our office in Jayanagar, Bangalore. And then we used to go and give training to Myco staff and give them support services. And then at that time, Murthy borrowed a Vespa scooter from his brother-in-law, Srinivas Kulkarni. He was lying in Hubli, he said, I will get it. And I used to drive the Vespa scooter, and he was my pillion rider.
That is a sight. That is a picture we want to see.
Raghavan, incidentally, that building now...
No, I will tell you one more. Then one day when we were going, the scooter gave some trouble. We stopped over there. Vikram Bhatt, who was the director of commercial at Myco, he stopped us and said, do you want a lift? Then we said, no, this is high time we get a car. Even then, our middle class frugality came in the way. We didn't buy a car. We leased a car with a driver. It's an ambassador car. Okay, now coming back to the ESOP schemes, I think that was it was an occasion when we realized that there was a lot of HR issues where there is a lot of competition for good professionals, and there has to be a way of retaining these people in the long term and also make them part owners of the company. So fortunately for us, the government had not thought of ESOP schemes at that point in time, and so we came out with the concept. The only big debate I remember we used to have, so Murthy being having a weakness for very smart, brilliant people, he wanted a certain percentage of the shares to go to the very bright people who are the anchors. But my view was I was more elite more egalitarian kind of an approach where I said 50% of the more egalitarian kind of an approach where I said 50% of the people at Infosys are the sheet anchors of the foundation on which we are building all this. They also, albeit a small amount of shares, they also should get some benefit out of the ESOP system. So this is how we discussed, and ultimately we agreed on a point where a chairman's quota was handled completely by him, and the other one, based on the number of people, how many years of service they put in, gradually we build the system so that everybody gets ESOP at some point of time, including the drivers.
How important was this for you, sir?
I think it's very important because having come up in a lower middle class family, having lived a fairly frugal life, for us the joy was seeing others also enjoy with us. So therefore, I think for us, creating an experiment in democratization of wealth was a very important one. There was not one person amongst the founders. I mean, Ashok is not here, the seventh one, but at that time he was not there. Everybody was very enthusiastic in sharing wealth with younger people. And of course, Mohan is not here. Mohan was, in some sense, architect of the technicalities of the stock option plan. But everybody bought into it because that was their basic belief.
Yeah.
Shereen, can I add?
Yes.
Murthy was a hardcore communist in his youth.
Yes, I remember till you went to jail somewhere. Where was that, Mr. Murthy?
I wouldn't call it jail. I was incarcerated in a place called Niš, which is a border town between what was then Yugoslavia and now Serbia and Bulgaria.
And that's when you decided that capitalism was the way to go.
Yeah. Shereen, can I add on
Please.
the ESOP? Even before the ESOP, I still remember an incident in 1985 or 84 or 85. I was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Murthy is in India, Murthy and Raghavan and others. So I get a call from there saying, Dinesh, we are redistributing the shares, and you, Shibu, and Aurora are going to get the 3% more than what you have today. So then I didn't question anything. I said, that is fine. And then later on I found out that where from that 3% for each one of us has come from. So it was Raghavan and Murthy who had given up their 9% together to make us richer. Today otherwise we would have been Shibu, me, and would not have been billionaires. So that is the kind of trust, we didn't ask for, but on their own, showing their fairness, they did that. That's very important among the founders, and that has translated into many other employees also later on.
Well, the ESOP scheme at Infosys not just set a benchmark for India, it's one of the turning points as far as corporate India itself is concerned.
I had to make the first presentation on Monday morning. And Sunday night, I had excruciating tooth pain. A lot of bravery. I just pulled the truth out.
You pulled the truth out.
Celebrating 15 years of Young Turks.